Okay, so I just wanted to give my thoughts on the news about Trooper Proctor here that happened right after the judge declared a mistrial in the Karen Read case after a hopelessly deadlocked jury was unable to reach a verdict. So I'm going to read here from Colonel John Mon of the Massachusetts State Police. So here's his statement, quote, "Following the mistrial in Commonwealth versus Karen Read, the Massachusetts State Police would like to offer our condolences again to the family of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. We cannot imagine the way in which this result has heightened the O'Keefe family's immeasurable grief, heartache, and sense of loss. John lived a life of honorable service both to the city of Boston and the children entrusted to his care after the unexpected death of his sister and brother-in-law. We will remember him. Upon learning today's result, the department took immediate action to relieve Trooper Michael Proctor of duty and formally transfer him out of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office State Police Detectives Unit. This follows our previous decision to open an internal affairs investigation after information about serious misconduct emerged in testimony at the trial. This investigation is ongoing. Our focus remains on delivering the highest level of police services with professionalism and integrity." End quote. So I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm wondering what we will see coming out next. I don't think this will be the end. I think we will see more fallout to this. My initial response is that there's a lot of reasons that they could have removed Trooper Proctor, right? I wish we knew a little bit more, but of course they're not going to tell us. But, you've got, obviously, there's the text messages, the unprofessional text messages. Unprofessional is the really kind way to put it. Horrifying, disgusting, just every bad word, right? But there's also really, really, really questionable police work, right? Whether it's being biased, whether it's being setting somebody up as being framed, whether it's just laziness, whether it's lack of proper training, right? That can happen in police departments where if they haven't been, if you've got officers that are making mistakes during investigations, but they weren't trained properly, that's an issue that needs to be addressed. But that would not go to those officers, right? That would go to their superiors who are in charge of providing that training, right? We didn't hear anything about a lack of training in this case. It more seems like individual officers that made certain decisions, but it reflects poorly on the entire office of the Massachusetts State Police. So, and actually, I don't know anything about military ranking, so I had to Google this. So a colonel looks like they're, in terms of like military rankings, that's really high up. I would imagine it might be the head of the entire Massachusetts State Police. So Colonel John Mon, by the way, it looks like he was appointed as lieutenant colonel only in February of 2023. But it looks like this wasn't out of anything shady happening. It says that he succeeds Colonel Christopher Mason, who had he retired after a 40-year career in law enforcement. So this dude retired, and then this John Mon, colonel, became the colonel, was appointed lieutenant colonel. But he did not have that position when all the shenanigans were going on, right, in 2022. So I heard Lieutenant Tully describe this, that they follow like that rigid like military structure. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for this colonel to have never known or met like Trooper Proctor or even Yuri Buchanan, if they, don't have a lot of direct contact with, if you're a trooper, right? And I would imagine you report to your immediate superior, but if you're following that structure, there's like a separation of powers, if you will, or separation between rankings, right? So anyway, my thought is this, that if you've got someone who is at the head of the Massachusetts State Police and really does not condone this type of behavior, whether it's the unprofessionalism or lack of training or having the right training but making bad decisions, right? As an investigator, laziness, ignorance, whatever it is, just being complacent, right? Or, like I said, or is something more shady than that, right? Like, anyway, the list would go on of the different ways you can view all the actions that were taken or not taken, in this case, by law enforcement from the Massachusetts State Police and other law enforcement agencies as well. But if you are now in charge and you do not want that to reflect badly on the entire Massachusetts State Police or on yourself as the person in charge, right? And you're really committed to fixing this because the whole world is looking at this now, right? And it reflects so poorly on them. So my thought is like, even if you just care about your reputation, even if that's your motivation, or if your motivation is to actually fix things, either way, I think this isn't the end of it, because I think they're going to, like, what I'm interested to see is what happens next, like with Yuri Buchanan, with some of the other troopers. I would say Yuri, I think, is probably the next one to look at, because he was Trooper Proctor's direct superior. And he was also there, and he was aware of what was going on, right? But again, if you've got someone like Trooper Proctor who's getting away with all this stuff, and remember too, it did come up in trial a little bit about the dressing down, as Jackson put it. We did hear about that in the trial a little bit, but it just sounded like there wasn't anything really done, because there wasn't, right, at the time. They waited until the end of the trial. Now here's where I think it gets interesting. They waited until the end of trial to give him for him to face the proper repercussions of those actions. Again, we don't know yet if their motivation was purely the unprofessionalism, or was it also the way he conducted the investigation, But here's the thing. The fact that they waited until the end of the trial, I think, is significant. What this says to me is that, there was a lot of speculation going through this as to whether or not the Commonwealth was going to call him or not. This looks like clearly this action was they were waiting to take these actions with him until after they learned if he was going to testify at trial, and if so, after he testified. Why is that? Well, obvious reasons, right? Had they fired him beforehand, right, it would have been really difficult for the Commonwealth, because either they would not call him and the defense could, right? And then it comes out, oh, well, so you're even worse than we thought you were because you've been fired, right? Like, in my mind, there would have definitely been a not guilty verdict, right? Like, in this case, instead of a mistrial. Because they could have been like, well, look, it was one bad apple. It was one bad apple, right? But we got rid of the bad apple. The rest of the department is great. And they didn't make that choice, which is, again, leads me to think there might be more fallout of this with the other troopers that were there. Because the one bad apple approach might have been a good idea. Might have. They could have maybe thwarted some of that fallout, but that's not what they did. They waited, and he took the stand. But here's what I think is really interesting. Even if it's just Trooper Proctor who gets fired, even if it's just him, how is this going to impact the Commonwealth's case going forward and their decision to retry? Because he's the lead detective, and again, the defense could still call him. It'll just be interesting to see what happens. But again, even if it's just Trooper Proctor that gets fired, but then add to that, what if it's him and Yuri Buchanan, and then maybe others? But how is in my mind, I'm like, this is significant. This is significant because, again, this shows that the Commonwealth felt like this could not have been done until after the trial. This happened immediately after the trial for a reason, right? Like within hours. Or after the trial, after the mistrial, right? It happened within hours. It shows that they really wanted to fire him, but they had to wait. And why? Because A, the Commonwealth knew they were going to have him testify, and B, they're like, it's only going to be worse if he's been fired. In my mind, that's just really significant as far as their decision to retry, or to maybe just only retry, but with counts 2 and 3. I know that a lot of people are saying the Commonwealth's going to retry. And I don't live in Massachusetts. I live in North Carolina. I didn't follow this before the trial. I already, before this announcement came out regarding Trooper Proctor, I already thought they would have to be nuts to retry it because of the fact that, well, A, they shouldn't have brought it in the first place. But besides that, because the Commonwealth obviously didn't think that, right? So if you take that out of the picture and you go with what the Commonwealth might be thinking, what Wally might be thinking, and his office. Well, at the very least at this point, you've now got all these questionable witnesses, who were impeached left, right, center, up, down, sideways, all the ways, time and time again on the witness stand for all their prior statements. And now, if there's another trial, now they've got all the statements from trial as well. But between having Trooper Proctor fired and then thinking about the impeachability of every single like other witness, literally, that the Commonwealth called, apart from like the tech experts, the Bodie lab in Virginia that did some of the testing. Apart from those people, right? There's a few exceptions, but all of the other witnesses, the McAlberts as they're called, and then even like Trooper Yuri Buchanan, if he isn't fired, like even him, right? These people who were so enmeshed in this entire thing from start to finish have been impeached so many times, even prior to the trial. And now you add the trial statements in, and that right there is like, well, can we even try to break these people? Like, my point is they're not going to have any witnesses if they retry it. They're going to be left only with like the cell phone expert, the medical examiner, the people who did the DNA testing at Bodie Labs, but they wouldn't be able to get that in without the witnesses to lay the foundation, which I don't know that those witnesses would be able to testify. Like, they're not going to be left with anything. They're not going to be left with any witnesses. And there's no evidence without witnesses. I think that this is just this happening is just increasingly moving for me in the direction of the Commonwealth. Even if they want to retry it, like, I'm sure Lawley wants to, right? I don't think they'll be able to. At the end of the day, if there's no way we can really get to the heart of what happened to John O'Keefe, that's it's absolutely tragic. It's absolutely tragic. But another trial, well, it would bring, okay, if Karen's found not guilty, that would be justice for her, right? But is it going to bring justice for the victim and the victim's family? I don't see how that's possible, right? Because if Karen's found not guilty, then what really happened to him, right? And if it's another mistrial, what really happened to him? I think it's really clear that what the Commonwealth was presenting is not what really happened to him. And I still think that's still what needs to happen, but I don't think that the way to get there is through another trial. I don't know if we'll ever find out what really happened to him, but the point is that looking at the cost of another trial, looking at putting the family through another trial, putting the town of Canton through another trial, and the state and the country, I mean, it's like, and for what, Like, what needs to happen is Karen needs to get her life back. And if they decide not to retry it and drop all the charges, that will happen. That will be justice for her, right? So, I mean, when you look at the cost versus benefits for this, right? I just don't see how they could even try to convince themselves it's a good idea to retry it. I don't think there will be any benefit to the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth wanting to find her guilty is not going to happen. I can't see how that will happen. And so I think that the best thing to do is to try to fix the issues that were going on in these different departments. And if there's another way forward to try to find out what really happened to him, that needs to happen. But other than that, I just hope that they don't make a really foolish decision to retry it. That's only it's not going to end up in a guilty verdict. That's my opinion, but that it's only going to cause more divisiveness, more stress, more grief for the family. It's going to cost taxpayer dollars. The list is endless of the reasons why this would be so difficult for so many people, and it still wouldn't end the way the Commonwealth would want it to end. So I'm really thinking they're not going to retry it. That's my opinion. We'll see what else happens. I mean, who knows, right? It's a fluid situation. Something else could happen that could maybe indicate that they are going to retry it. But I will continue to keep an eye on everything that's happening here. And we are finishing still the recaps of the trial. Right now we are going through Trooper Paul's testimony. So we're still going to finish all the recaps for the rest of the trial. And at that point, the plan is, after I finish that, the plan is to go back and cover all of the pretrial hearings, court filings, documents, all the pretrial litigation, and keep an eye, of course, on July 22nd. They will have that status conference where the Commonwealth may announce their official decision, whether they're going to retry or not. Anyway, that's the latest here. For anyone who's new, feel free to join us on the recaps. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for being a squirrel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.